Welcome to week 4. This week, we will explore the world of crafts. We'll begin with a discussion on traditional Joseon craft production and their relationship with women and feminine space in the Yangban home and in the palace. Korea has a rich history of craft making. The aesthetics of the Joseon period is easily distinguishable by its minimalistic beauty and inspiration from nature. This is in contrast to the exquisite and glamorous beauty found in crafts of the preceding Silla and Goryeo periods. Main types of crafts produced in the Joseon period include ceramics, most predominantly white porcelain and puncheongware, woodworks and lacquerware, metalware, as well as textiles and embroideries. Let me start with ceramics. If the most representative type of ceramic of the Joseon period was celadon, the equivalent of the Joseon Dynasty is most definitely white porcelain. White porcelain, or pekja in Korean, was a manifestation of Joseon Confucian ideals that valued modesty, filial piety, harmony, and scholarship. Elites and leaders of the Joseon Dynasty deliberately avoided Goryeo-style extravagance and emphasized minimalistic beauty in their ceramics. While whiteware was produced in limited amounts before the Joseon period, porcelain was officially adopted as royal ware of the Joseon court in the 15th century, mirroring the trends seen in China during the Ming Dynasty. In the 1460s, the royal court established and oversaw a group of government-run kilns known as bunwon that were located in present-day Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do Province, in order to produce white porcelain for the court. In the early Joseon period, these white porcelains were reserved for royalty. However, affluent Yangban and even commoners eventually came to use porcelain, and even the bunwon kilns were privatized in the 1880s. Although white porcelain was loved and used by the royalty and upper classes, its functional and elegant design also made it popular among common people. While some items produced in bunwon kilns were meant for the court, many were likely intended for different governmental departments and affluent private buyers. By the 16th century, whiteware was no longer exclusive to the court, and regional kilns began producing white porcelain. Although these were of lower quality than those produced in bunwon kilns, the growth of private porcelain kilns fulfilled the growing demand for porcelain. While white porcelain represented Joseon Yangban pursuits of scholarly and ethical virtue through its purity, buncheongsagi, or puncheongware, encapsulated popular Joseon aesthetics of spontaneity and rustic, unrefined elegance. This type of Joseon ceramic was primarily produced from the late 14th century to the early 17th century. The style emerged as a more affordable alternative to the highly priced celadon ware, and reflects a shift towards more accessible and practical ceramics. The ware is often adorned with decorative techniques such as incising, stamping, and inlaying. Patterns and motifs can range from simple geometric designs to more elaborate floral and nature-inspired themes. This grey-green stoneware was used by both the elite and commoners, and even became immensely popular among the Japanese, who found that puncheongware made excellent teaware. During the Japanese invasions of Korea in the late 16th century, many Korean potters were captured and brought to Japan. Their skills and knowledge contributed to the spread of Korean ceramic techniques, including those used in puncheongware that were valued for their aesthetic simplicity and functionality in Japan. Unfortunately, when white porcelain became readily available by mid-Joseon, the popularity of puncheongware greatly declined. Let's look at the relation between Joseon crafts and women. Producers of hard crafts such as ceramics, metalware, glassware, and lacquerware were predominantly men in the Joseon period. Even painted decorations on ceramics and mother-of-pearl designs were jobs given to male artisans and artists. Women, on the other hand, were responsible for producing textiles and embroideries. Textiles and embroidery were understood as innately female craft, and the term 규방 공예 was used to refer to this craft. 규방 referred to traditional women's quarters, and 공예 meant craft. Thus, female craft of sewing was inherently tied to the feminine space. Textiles and embroideries were produced by women, even in the palace. There were different bureaus dedicated to different types of crafts in the palace. While women could not take on high-ranking posts within offices of 친방 and 수방 that produced clothes and embroideries respectively, female workers were employed for producing these types of beautiful and intricate pieces of clothes and folding screens. Women employed for these tasks were generally of low status, mostly classified as 기생 or government slaves. Generally, there was a division of labor between men and women. Men would direct and create designs for embroidery, and women would execute these ideas. Unfortunately, credit for these works mostly went to the men, while female workers were uncredited or credited with only their first names in historical documents. Moreover, embroidered screens decorated the court along with painted screens. In addition to professional female workers who participated in the production of textiles, female members of the royal family also engaged in embroidery as a form of pastime and as a way of cultivating female moral virtues of the Confucian Joseon society. Women outside of the court were also producers of clothes, embroideries, and various textile crafts. In Joseon society, needlework was intricately tied to feminine virtue. 조각보 was a representative textile craft produced by women in the Joseon Dynasty. 조각보 refers to patchwork or quilted wrapping cloth made by sewing together small pieces of fabric. These fabrics were typically leftover scraps from other sewing projects or from worn-out clothing, and the patchwork was often done in a geometric or irregular pattern. They would be used for a variety of purposes, including wrapping gifts, storing small objects, clothes or blankets in the house, covering food and plates, and more. Women could express their creativity and sense of aesthetics through their designs that were both intricate and spontaneous. 조각보 is a culmination of Joseon aesthetics and female wisdom in making use of resources in the household. Needlework was strongly associated with feminine space, commonly referred to as 규방. 규방, by definition, refers to women's quarters or living space in a traditional Korean hanok. Women's quarters of the house were private, innermost spaces of the house, where women would conduct various domestic activities such as sewing, cooking, childcare, and socializing amongst themselves. It was typically separated from the main living areas where men and guests would be entertained. Of course, these divisions of space between the genders were mostly emphasized by the social elite. Commoners had little resources to demonstrate these Confucian values in their daily lives. Women of lower class had to work, often outside of female quarters. Yangban women's quarters were often well decorated with various crafts. Typically, this included small wooden furniture, often lacquered and decorated with mother-of-pearl, mirrors, candle holders, jewelry boxes, cushions, and vases. It is notable that there were specific patterns used for items made for women. Patterns of grapes and pomegranates that symbolized fertility, peonies that symbolized femininity and beauty, as well as bats that represented fortune, were some popular motifs found in crafts used in the feminine space. More importantly, female quarters were a production site for the aforementioned textile crafts and embroideries. Tools that were required for this craft production were often referred to as 규중칠우, the 7 friends of a lady, opposed to the 문방사우, the 4 friends of a scholar, that included the brush, inkstick, inkstone, and paper. The 7 tools often found in feminine spaces were the ruler, thimble, scissors, thread, needle, iron, and a soldering iron. These tools were crucial elements for needlework and constituted the feminine space of Chosun households. One crucial work for Chosun Yangban women was to make robes for their husbands in office, as traditional hanbok had to be disassembled and assembled each time they would be washed and ironed. Making and maintaining clothes was a full-time job. Many affluent households, therefore, hired help for this reason. Not only did they produce uniforms that their husbands would need to enter the palace, but they were also responsible for creating their rank badges. According to the creativity and skills of the women in each household, the quality of rank badges would differ. While needlework was as much of an elegant expression of female virtue as it was a household labor for Yangban women, it was an important source of income for many commoners. Women of lower status and even poor Yangban women would often work for bigger households and receive payment for making clothes. In a society with severe restrictions on female activities, needlework was one crucial element that was permitted to Chosun women and allowed women's self-expression and economic sustainability. The first session of week 4 was on traditional Chosun crafts, particularly those produced and used by women in the feminine space. For next week, we will look at crafts and designs that came into fashion toward the end of the Chosun dynasty onto the early 20th century.